Welcome to the Broke Adult Podcast, where we talk about money the way some of us experience it. Messy, stressful, and way later than planned. I'm Deborah Johnson Miranda, and this is unfiltered money talk for people who think it's too late to get good with their money. Let's figure it out together without the shame and the judgment. Thank you for joining me on this episode today. We are going to be talking about the 6 things that I learned about money and having ADHD. Because if you have ADHD, then you know that it's a very common thing to have financial struggles throughout our lives, and we spend a lot of our lives feeling a lot of shame and judgment. I want to just kind of put name or like a topic to 6 things that I learned and just talk about them, just give my feedback and my thoughts on how I dealt with those things in the past and what I'm doing now in the future. So 2 years ago at age 54, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I've told this story before in a blog post, which you can find on my website at B Money Coaching. I wasn't crazy about the idea of a diagnosis because I believed that my executive dysfunction was something that was just normal in the context of my life. And I think that's true of a lot of people with ADHD. We're so overwhelmed with so many things that we have to do that it's normal for us. When actually being forgetful, being scatterbrained, and being a procrastinator, I learned, is not really the norm. So for people who are neurodivergent, that's what we're used to, but putting a name on it was really helpful. I saw ADHD though as the way people look at horoscopes. Like, okay, we can make this fit anybody. Anybody can be scatterbrained or forgetful during certain periods of their lives. But for people with ADHD, it's a bit different because our brains are wired differently. I'm a single mama. I'm a caregiver to my mother and my sister. I have a business, and I also have to take care of myself. And so all of those things put together would overwhelm me. And I just thought it was normal to feel scatterbrained and to feel like I wasn't holding up my weight. I also told myself that I wasn't hyperactive because I'm not physically hyperactive. I do need stuff to fidget with, but I didn't realize that you can have hyperactivity in your brain as well. Speaking of fidgeting, I'm actually going to get something that I can play with while I do this, because otherwise I'm going to be just all over the place. I'm going to use this soccer ball that I'm not going to spin it because it's going to be annoying if I'm spinning it throughout the entire episode, but I do have my little Ahsoka Tano, and I will probably just fidget with her for a little bit. So I didn't realize that being hyperactive could also mean having a million things going on in your head all at the same time, like a crazy highway overpass where there are so many interconnecting ramps and off ramps and just things all over the place. The main thing that stood out for me was how I've managed my money throughout my life, which has been not the best way, at least not in the way that would have put me in a position today to be in a better place financially. But I always say it's never too late to get started working on your money. And that's why I am okay. I've made peace with not being in the same place as a lot of my peers. So there are a lot of things that I've done or not done throughout my life that are a consequence of having ADHD. When my son got a diagnosis at age 19, I learned that ADHD has a genetic component. It means that if you have it, it's likely that one of your parents has it. My dad was autistic, and I never really saw any ADHD symptoms or things in him, but my mother definitely has it. I was proud of my son for taking matters into his own hands and looking for an explanation for why his brain worked the way it did. Once he got a diagnosis, my kids were like, "Mama, please go see somebody," because now that we know that Giancarlo has it, we're pretty sure that you have it. So here we are. Here are the 6 things that I learned about ADHD and money and how this has affected my life. Your experience may be different because everybody obviously is different. ADHD exists on a spectrum, but some of the things may sound a bit familiar. So here we go. Number 1, we don't notice behavior patterns, or we just ignore them if we do notice them. All our lives, those of us with diagnosed and undiagnosed ADHD have had to face some kind of test. The test was like a will to see how much we could accomplish and not freak out about it, whether we could apply for a job or a promotion, or whether we could sustain a relationship. With ADHD, it's hard to feel like we can be successful at something because we leave behind a trail of unfinished projects. I mean, I have a list this long of all the things that I have wanted to do that I have just not completed, both in my personal life and with respect to my children. So here's an example of some things that I've done that are the essence of ignoring patterns and how it has been detrimental to my financial life. I was 20 at the first job that ever offered me a retirement plan. I didn't join the plan. I didn't get the 401k. I didn't open it because I wasn't going to be retiring anytime soon. So why do I need a retirement plan? But at some point, something was like, you know what? This would be a good adult thing to do. This would be a financially responsible thing to do. You need to think of your future. And so I opened a 401k and I contributed about $500 to the plan before I quit the job. 4 years later, I got a job at the University of Washington, so stable government job. I became eligible to participate in the voluntary investment program. So as a state agency, the University of Washington does require, like most government employment, will take money out of your check for a pension so that when you retire, you can draw on that pension. But a lot of places also offer a version of a 401k. In this case, it was a 403b, and it was a way for people to invest outside of getting their pension. So it was voluntary rather than involuntary. And again, I didn't participate because I had a mortgage, and how was I going to afford to contribute to a retirement plan? I just was convinced that we couldn't afford it. So when I got a promotion, a pretty big one in a professional capacity, so no longer union, but more managerial, I decided that I would be a financially responsible person and begin contributing to the voluntary investment program, or VIP or VIP. 6 months later, I got pregnant and quit that job to be a stay-at-home mom. So I only had 6 months worth of contributions in that voluntary investment program. I worked at the University of Washington for 7 or 8 years. And during that time, I could have built up a really decent beginning of a retirement plan rather than just 6 months of a voluntary investment program. In the 2000s, I started reading personal finance books. So Susie Orman, David Bach, and learned a lot about personal finance. A lot of the things that they said back then ring true today. I'm talking about just the basics of investing in low-cost index funds, of having no credit card debt, of buying a car used instead of new, of investing for your retirement, saving for retirement, and having an emergency fund, just the basics. There were other things that they would discuss, especially Susie Orman, but I'm not going to get into that today, that I didn't take to heart, and I don't take to heart today. I don't preach that line of guilt and shaming, but the basics were there. And I learned a lot about the basics. I decided that I was going to be a financially responsible person / grown-up. I got life insurance because I already had 2 children and I had a third one on the way. And I opened a brokerage account because I was going to buy stock, right? Not an index fund, not an ETF, non-mutual fund, nothing like that, but individual stock. But then something happened and I got bored. The shininess and the pride in doing something new and glittery wore off. What I realized was that when people with ADHD do a thing and we get really excited about the hobby or the new job or taking action in some way, eventually we get bored. The dopamine just goes, it disappears. And that's the end of that. That's what happened. Nobody clapped when I got life insurance. Nobody gave me a trophy. I didn't get a reward. And then I eventually convinced myself that we couldn't afford life insurance or a brokerage account. So I closed both accounts. Are you seeing a pattern? I didn't really at the time, but I did feel the guilt that I knew what I should be doing, but I wasn't doing it. So like many people with ADHD, I knew the so-called right thing to do, but it was never sustained. And after reading books and getting information online and doing research, I knew what I should be doing, and I really, really tried because my heart was in it. I really wanted to do it, but something in my brain was not letting me sustain the action. And it turns out that the something in my brain was missing, the neurotransmitters that help you sustain these things. This is something that neurotypical people don't understand. And so they see it as, oh my God, why can't you just do this? Why are you so bad with money? According to Attitude Magazine, a magazine dedicated to children and adults with ADHD, ADHD is associated with the dysregulation of 3 key neurotransmitters. I'm reading from my screen here. Dopamine, which supports focus and motivation, is implicated in reward. When that goes down, then that's when the shininess and the newness wears off and we just move on to something else. Norepinephrine helps with alertness, cognitive processing, and working memory. This is why We forget things, and this is why we suffer from time blindness, why our go-to or our default word is, what? We heard you, because we don't have problems with our hearing, but it's the cognitive processing. It takes us a while to catch up. Then there's serotonin, which regulates mood, emotion, anxiety, sleep, and circadian rhythm, all areas of struggle with people with ADHD. The circadian rhythm, it'll be important later. So dysregulation, that's what we are. Looking back, the ADHD cycle of new and shiny things and the dopamine wipeout, which led to boredom, was obvious. I mean, I can see the patterns from the time I was a kid to even today. But I didn't realize it at the time because I was too caught up in the guilt and embarrassment of my inability to be financially responsible. And when you're bogged down in anxiety and shame and embarrassment, it's really hard to get a move on those things that you really want to do. I tried to change. I tried to be better, but my ADHD brain caught up with me. And in 2017, and then again in 2019, I filed for bankruptcy to stop foreclosure on my home. I got so far behind on my payments that since I didn't have an emergency fund, I was unable to catch up. The reason for getting behind in the first place was not getting paid on time. When I was overseas, I was trying to call in my hours. I didn't get paid, and it just snowballed. Everything just snowballed, and I got further and further behind. I wasn't able to work out a refinancing with the mortgage servicer. It's a whole thing. I talked about it in a New York Times interview, and I've talked about this on the blog. But after the first bankruptcy, I started working part-time, and I decided that I was going to be a financial responsible person. Started to deposit weekly paychecks into savings. So I was like, hey, I can see this balance growing. The dopamine is like, yay, the shiny, glittery new thing is happening. But then I was like, oh, I have all this money in savings. Let's go spend it. And it was the spending and not the saving that hit me in the ass. Then I would feel guilty. And then I would save again, and the cycle would continue. Things came to a head when I was a month away from foreclosure, and I had to make the decision to sell my home. In January 2020, 1 month before my 50th birthday, I was checking my small retirement balances from the voluntary investment program at the University of Washington. And I thought, I should open a Roth IRA. I knew that I could open a Roth IRA with after-tax dollars. I knew that it was going to be tax-free on withdrawal and retirement. And I knew the basic rules of the Roth. I opened up an account and immediately set up a transfer from my savings for $100. I took that leap, but I was super, super scared. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to sustain it. I recognized, I guess, in that moment, the patterns from the before. I get really excited about doing something and I put money into it and then I stop. But I am proud to say that I have contributed to my Roth IRA every month since that January 2020. I haven't maxed out my Roth every year, but I've come very, very close, and I have never missed a month of contributions because the dopamine rush I get when I look at my account is like, whew, it just goes, it goes crazy. So I get the shiny, glittery thing when I see how much my account has grown little by little every month. At least that's what I think it is. That is the dopamine thing. So I'm really proud of that. It's been over 6 years, and I just, maybe we learn things a bit later, or maybe it's that our environments just aren't made for neurodivergence. Maybe it's a combination of those things. The world is set up for neurotypical people. It's not set up for people like us. And in finance, if you're a person of color, if you are Black, if you are disabled, trans, somebody who grew up poor, and you are neurodivergent, you've already got all these things, these intersecting identities going against you. That's one of the reasons why so many of us struggle with these things. And that's what I want you to take away from this. So number 2, we're not lazy. There's a perception that people with ADHD are lazy. We procrastinate, we're late, we're flaky. First of all, laziness is a capitalist construct. Rest is not a crime. Western society prizes people who are work all the fucking time. We are not cogs. We are not machines. We are not automatons. We are not robots. We are human beings. And human beings have a limited capacity to constantly be doing physical and mental labor. But capitalism demands that we expend ourselves so much. And then when we're not able to do that, or when we just don't want to do that because we want to take a fucking nap, we get punished for it. Our bodies are commoditized. Our worth is tied to what we can do for the economy, which is to line the pockets of corporate executives. That's why people who are disabled and can't work are seen as throwaway people. Because, if you're disabled and you physically can't work, like my sister is disabled, she's got cognitive and physical issues that prevent her from working. She's not a throwaway person just because she can't physically contribute to the economy. So when a neurodivergent person has difficulty understanding a concept or is late, we label them as lazy and irresponsible. 3 years ago, I quit a job because of my inability to learn a program that I needed to use to dole money out for scholarships to local colleges and universities. I was expected to learn it on my own, and there was no way I was going to be able to do that because it was far beyond my capabilities. It was causing friction between me and my boss, and me and a coworker. I asked for training and I complained because I needed time to learn and I needed somebody to sit down with me for 30 minutes a day to teach me, but that wasn't within their capacity. That's just not something that they did. So I became embarrassed because the person I was working with learned it faster than I did, and she kept complaining because I wasn't keeping up. I was embarrassed to complain, and so I just kept quiet. I internalized all these things, and then finally I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to quit. I ended up quitting a job that paid very, very well, that had really great hours, lots of flexibility, great benefits. It's a job that I would still have today if only I had had the supports, but I didn't know how to ask for the supports. All I knew was to complain that I wasn't getting trained on this program that I needed to learn. Then there's the whole issue of our circadian rhythms. So that goes back to that serotonin thing. They're goofy. It's hard to be at work at 8 o'clock Monday through Friday when you're up until 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning. That's a very common thing with ADHD people. Sometimes we are working or getting things done, maybe doing the dishes, folding laundry, cleaning the house, or maybe we're just scrolling on our phones. It's very quiet at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's easier to get things done. It's easier to be able to think, but that leads to daytime drowsiness, and that can lead to daytime executive dysfunction challenges. Having an 8 to 5 job for me was always really hard. I was never on time to work. Never, ever, ever. Even when I was working at a job before this scholarship place, I had a hard time being at work at 9 because I'd be up until 3 or 4 in the morning. Then I'd have to get up to take my kids to school. It was just a whole thing. Another thing I've heard of is that when we have an appointment or meeting in the afternoon, we find it difficult to do anything before that meeting. Let's say you get up at 8 or 9 and your appointment is at 2 o'clock. For people with ADHD, I don't know if this happens with autistic people, but it happens to me that I cannot move. Like I will get up at 8 or 9. I will make breakfast. I'll get my mom's and my sister's breakfast and their medicines. And if we have an appointment at 2 or 3 o'clock, I will sit my ass down and I will not move. I will not be able to do anything until my alarm goes off, and the alarm goes off to tell me that it's time to get ready. I discovered that there's a name for this, and I have it down here in my notes. It's called ADHD waiting mode. Because of our challenges with timing, because we have time blindness, anxiety, and difficulty managing tasks, we enter this state of paralysis where we can sit and scroll through the phone or binge watch a show while we wait for the time to come to leave the house. Sometimes we're still late to that appointment, which piles up more anxiety and shame. Then the other thing that it says, this is what I found in my research. ADHD causes challenges with task initiation, task completion, time blindness, and hyperfixation. End up feeling super guilty. We're constantly paying attention to the talk because we know we have time blindness, or we get so hyper fixated on something that we're doing because we really like it and because that we're getting that dopamine rush, and we don't hear the alarm that tells us it's time to get off our asses to leave to go to our appointment. So to compensate for these two things, we sit and we wait. The ADHD brain doesn't have a way to pump the brakes. It's either now or not now. There's no in between. And I've been through this whole waiting mode thing all my life, but I never knew that it had a name. I never knew what it was called. In fact, I didn't know what it was called until I was doing research for this episode. All right, so number 3, we need the right tools for our brains. I have to have this on my notes because if I don't read from notes, I'm going to be talking about that Clone Wars episode where they capture the Zillo Beast. Okay, I mean, I will just go off on these tangents. I have to have something to keep me focused so that I don't waste your time and so I keep you entertained. Okay. We need the right tools for our brains. Have you ever noticed how twirling a pen in your hands during a meeting helps you focus? Or how some people have like a squeeze ball, or they'll have something like this that they can just spin? You hear that? Okay. A lot of people say it helps keep me busy. It helps me concentrate. My son's tool is his leg. He'll be like jiggling his leg up and down. And then I'll be like, are you okay? And he'll be like, oh, sorry. I'm like, no, it's okay. You're fine. But that's something that happens. We need to have something always having to be moving. When I'm making videos, when I'm making my reels, or like even now as I'm talking to you here, I've got Ahsoka Tano. I'm like bending her knees and I'm bending her feet. Well, her feet don't bend. Okay, I'm bending her arms and her elbows so that I can concentrate and not wander off on some tangent. So there are other tools that people need. Squeeze balls, fidgets. There was a woman who I saw on a video on a TikTok a couple of years ago who had a bag of dollar store animals. And so she had a bag of dinosaurs and she was pulling out all these little dinosaurs and she just uses them to make her videos. So she can have these little things all over the place and she can just touch them and, squeeze them and feel how hard they are. Then there are people who use timers, prompts, medications, squeeze balls, music like binaural beats, alarms on their phones, alarms for their alarms. Like if I go through my alarm list on my iPhone, you'll see a bunch of alarms. They'll be like for appointments, but then I will have an alarm for the morning. My mom has an appointment this week at 9:30 in the morning. I have an alarm that goes off the night before to remind me that she has this appointment. Then I have an alarm to wake me up to get ready for the appointment. And then I have an alarm for that 9:30 appointment that says time to leave. I need those prompts because if I don't have them, if my alarms don't have alarms, then we'll end up leaving at 10 o'clock and the appointment's at 9:30 and then we'll get there and then I'll be stressed and angry and embarrassed that I got my mom late to her appointment. But those are things that have helped me. Other tools that people have are wobbly seats. I remember when my youngest was in grade school in second or third grade, the teacher was going to order these hard wobbly seats that students, the ones who, like to move around in their seats, they could sit and it would kind of wobble them back and forth. Those are things that people might be able to use, or those yoga balls that people can sit on at their desks. My son Giancarlo, the one with ADHD, wanted one of those lights that you can put in a room that has like stars. I got one for him for the bathroom because he likes ambiance and textures and smells. He loves candles and incense. I got him those shower tablets that he can just throw into the shower and kind of let the steam release the smell. So those are things that I call tools. Some tools have textures that help you with focusing. Maybe you need a specific food like gummy bears or sour candy. I always have to have some kind of candy in my desk drawer here. Another tool is co-working groups or FaceTiming with an accountability buddy. In a co-working group, you join an online platform, you do some work like on Zoom for an hour, and then maybe half an hour is just chatting, body doubling. So with an accountability buddy, you can body double with a co-working group. And a quick plug here for my co-working group. It's going to start up again at the end of May on the fourth Tuesday, which will be the 26th. And it's to help people just kind of get through checking their bank balances, looking at bills that need to be paid, and just kind of having an opportunity or a safe, quiet space to be able to do those things. It's free if you join my newsletter. So you can sign up for that in the show notes. All right. So number 4. There's no such thing as being bad with money. I don't believe there's such a thing, and I believe that assigning a value of good or bad to being able to manage money can have a consequential impact on our lives that can be negative. Instead of saying that you're bad with money, you can just say, I'm not happy with some of the choices I've made. I need to work on connecting money to my value system so that I can build a relationship with my finances. Debt is neutral. A low credit score or having debt or an overdrawn account is not a reflection of my worth as a person. I never learned how to manage money because I was never taught in a way that aligns with my goals. And now I'm working to change that. I'm learning from my mistakes. I've learned to look for credible information online and know who I can ask for help. Because anywhere you look on social media, people are going to list all the ways that you're bad with your money. You're throwing money away on this, throwing money away on that. A big target for these people is you're throwing money away, you're being irresponsible by ordering DoorDash or by buying pre-made foods. That ends up making you feel like shit. You know, I hate DoorDash for the shitty way they treat their drivers and for their extortionate fees. But I will still defend anybody who uses DoorDash or Uber Eats or Postmates or whatever the hell they use to feed themselves, because nourishment of the body is a way bigger deal than whether you spent $25 ordering, you know, McDonald's from DoorDash. So a while back, there was a post on Medium about, you know, these are all the ways you're throwing money away. And the writer included ordering delivery. I couldn't let that slide without leaving a comment. I said, you know, there are times when parents, whether you're married, partnered, single, whatever, being a parent is hard enough. But then you have to feed these people. If somebody orders DoorDash to feed their kids a pizza and burgers or whatever, it's not throwing money away if you're using that to feed people. She replied saying, it's easy enough for tired parents to throw something together to feed their children, so there's no reason to order DoorDash. And I let it go. I wasn't going to get into a back and forth with her, but she completely missed the point. I know what it's like to be a single parent. I am a single parent and I'm a caregiver, and sometimes I am fucking tired. Over the past 3.5 months since my mom had her stroke and my sister's had a lot of health issues, on occasion I have ordered delivery. Not often. I'm lucky to have a son who drives, and so I'll place an order and he'll go pick up the food. And you know what? When I was facing foreclosure and I was trying to figure out what to do about the bankruptcy, there were times when I was so depressed and just unable to move. And yeah, I would order DoorDash because I had 3 kids at home, my mom and my sister, and some of us just couldn't do it. And it was the fucking pandemic. I don't believe in shaming people for ordering delivery. So number 5, we know more about money than we are led to believe. Just because you don't know how to figure out an amortization schedule, or you don't understand exactly what causes the stock market to drop, doesn't mean that you don't know anything about money. Personal finance is such a huge topic. Even if it were taught in every high school in the country, we're not all going to learn everything there is to know about personal finance. We all start at 0, okay? I know, because people are like, oh my God, LOL, I'm so bad with money. Ha ha ha. I feel so dumb. I can't add. You're not dumb with money. I bet you if I sat you down, there's some questions I could ask you to which you'd be like, oh, okay. You may not think they're a big deal, but I bet you could answer some questions. So I've got them written down and I'm going to ask you. I hope you can answer yes to at least 3 of these questions. Listen carefully. Answer to yourself yes or no after each one. Can you calculate how much you make each month based on an hourly rate? Do you understand that when you calculate your monthly salary, that the amount before taxes is the gross amount? Do you know what your net pay is? Do you know that even if you have a 401k, you can open a traditional or Roth IRA? Do you know that money that you have in an emergency fund should be kept in a savings account separate from everyday expenses? Do you know that it's a recommended practice to pay your credit card bill in full each month to avoid paying interest? Do you know that you can ask the company that holds your 401k for a free meeting so you can talk to an advisor? Do you know if your bank or credit union has eliminated overdraft fees? Do you know not to use the same PIN across different debit cards? Do you know where gas is cheapest in your area? Do you compare prices when you go to the grocery store? Okay, how'd you do? I want to know. And if you don't know, go through each question and find out the answer. You can read the transcript. Just go through the questions. If you don't know, then, sign up for my newsletter. Follow me on social media because I talk about this shit. Okay, last one. Number 6, the ADHD tax is real. Paying for convenience, buying multiples, paying late fees, the cost of replacing things that you've lost, job loss, underemployment, traffic tickets, medicine, and the list goes on. Here are some examples of ways that I pay more for things that on the surface, maybe people are like, why can't you just do it this way? Well, I can't. That's why I'm doing it this way. I pay the tax. I'm not complaining about paying the tax. I'm just saying that this is a thing that neurodivergent people have to deal with. Okay, these things help me and my son. I buy sliced cheese instead of a block of cheese. Individual containers of food instead of buying in bulk. Copays for medication. Replacement of lost keys, wallets, power cords, chargers, glasses. I buy extras of frequently used items like lip balm, socks, toiletries, keys. I grew up with blocks of cheese that sometimes came from the food bank, and we would slice with a cheese slicer. For me, sliced cheese was a luxury. When my son, Giancarlo, the one with ADHD, asked me to buy sliced cheese as a teen, I was like, no, use the cheese slicer. We have a block of cheese. Then he said, but it's too much work. I would tell him that a little extra effort never hurt anybody. If he didn't want to slice the cheese, then he didn't want a slice that bad. So he wouldn't make the sandwich and he would go hungry. Then I would be frustrated because I would want him to eat. What I didn't understand was that he had ADHD, first of all, and that the ADHD brain needs as few steps as possible to get to a result. The energy wears off so fast, which explains why we start things and we don't finish them. My son's brain energy was expended by the act of taking an extra step for a cheese sandwich. What I didn't realize at the time was that people with ADHD sometimes struggle with eating because of the number of steps involved in preparing food. This goes back to that whole laziness crap. And I can't tell you how much I regret my ignorance. I never meant to cause my son any extra struggle. I've had to learn this, that just because I had to struggle doesn't mean my children have to struggle. So that brings me to accommodations and supports. Those things cost money. Those are all part of the ADHD tax. And actually a great motivator for me to save money, because if one of my kids needs something, I want to be there to support them in their need for an accommodation. We're learning together. They have taught me so much about what they need. They've been pretty vocal about the kinds of things they need. The kinds of supports don't always cost money, but, I have that money. I have that extra incentive, that why. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you saving? Why are you being different with your money? It's because I want there to be comfort for my children. So thank you so much for hanging out today. I'm going to recap briefly the 6 things that we talked about. I've got my list here. We don't notice behavior patterns. Once that dopamine shiny shit wears off, we're done. Until next time. Number 2, we're not lazy. Number 3, we need the right tools for our brains and how they work. What works for me may not work for you. ADHD exists on a sort of spectrum. There's no such thing as being bad with money. Telling someone they're bad with money is shaming, and people with ADHD are already shaming themselves enough, believe me. We know more about money than we've been led to believe. Everyone starts at the bottom. And finally, the ADHD tax is an actual thing, and it sucks. To keep up to date on the Broke Adult podcast, follow the show so you can download future episodes. And if this episode resonated with you, please leave a review and share it with a friend and on social media. If you want to work with me, I'd love to hear from you. Get started by going to the link in the show notes to schedule a free 30-minute strategy call. I'd love to talk to you about how we can work together to turn your financial frustrations into money muscle. Want to get to know me more before committing? Join my newsletter. Every week, I share all the things about being a mama, a money coach, caregiver, and how I manage my own finances, and how all that is tied together with my money. Visit my website at bemoneycoaching.com/links. Information provided in the Broke Adult podcast is for general information and does not constitute any agreement between yourself and Be Money Coaching, the Broke Adult podcast, or Here We Are Now LLC. By downloading and listening, you understand that neither myself nor any guest is here to provide any legal, financial, medical, or therapeutic advice, or any other professional advice. And any of its episodes should always do so should users of this podcast and any of its episodes should always do their due diligence and seek out advice from a licensed professional before taking any action. No responsibility is assumed for any information contained or shared through this podcast, and we disclaim any liability with respect to errors, inaccuracies, omissions, misleading, or defamatory statements. By using this podcast, you accept this disclaimer and use at your own personal risk.